I want you to imagine a very specific, probably very familiar scenario for a second. Have you ever painstakingly built a foundation for a new goal in your life?
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. Like
Right.
maybe it's a massive career pivot you've been dreaming about for years, or a new dynamic you're trying to establish in a long-term relationship, or even a creative project you finally decided to take seriously.
Yeah, you lay all the groundwork.
Exactly. You buy the domain name, you have the difficult conversation, you do the strategic planning, you set your alarm for 5 in the morning, you do everything right.
You do.
But the exact moment you actually try to move forward and execute, it feels like you're trying to drive a semi-truck through a tunnel that was built for a bicycle.
That is exactly how it feels.
Your jaw is clenched tight enough to crack a tooth, your shoulders are practically pinned up by your ears, and you are completely, fundamentally exhausted.
Running on empty.
Running on empty, even though you literally just started.
It's a visceral, full-body resistance. You are pressing the gas pedal entirely to the floor, the engine is screaming, but the emergency brake is still fully engaged.
Yes, the emergency brake.
And the tragedy is, when we feel that resistance, when that internal check engine light starts flashing bright red, we almost never pull over to look under the hood.
No, we just yell at the dashboard.
Exactly. We yell at it. We tell ourselves to shut up, push harder, stop being lazy, and just get to the destination.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sources we're looking at today completely dismantle that approach. We are doing a deep dive into an architectural life text that it just shifts the paradigm entirely.
It really does.
It argues that building a solid foundation, like figuring out your targets, your truths, your commitments, is essential. But a foundation without an engine is really just a beautiful, incredibly heavy statue.
Doesn't go anywhere.
Right, it doesn't move. And you can't just slap any engine on it and expect it to move. So today, for part 2 of our double feature, we are walking down into the engine room, specifically looking at chapters 3 and 4.
Personalisms and Environmentistics.
Yes, and the position of 1. Our mission today is to figure out how to generate actual sustainable momentum by aligning your internal fuel with your external terrain.
It's a massive shift.
And ultimately, we're going to look at the mathematics of shifting from being a reactive puppet in your own life to becoming an autonomous force.
And that transition from being a highly reactive variable that constantly adjusts to everyone else to becoming an autonomous constant that anchors the room. That's the absolute crux of this entire framework.
The core of it all.
Because, as you pointed out, a foundation is completely static. To create a life that actually moves, evolves, and adapts without breaking you in the process, you need to understand the physics of movement.
The physics of movement.
Yeah, you have to understand the invisible forces that are actively propelling you forward, and perhaps more importantly, the invisible forces that are inevitably trying to lock you in place.
Wow.
We're essentially moving from the static architecture of a building to the dynamic physics of a moving vehicle.
I love the scale of that. So let's start in the engine room. The sources call this internal fuel system personalisms.
Yes.
And right off the bat, I want to clarify something, because when I first read the word personalisms, I thought, oh, great, another personality test.
Oh, like Myers-Briggs or something?
Exactly. I thought, am I an introvert, an extrovert, a type A, a type B? But that's not what this is at all.
Not even close.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is that our culture trains us to think of personality or internal drives as these static, unchangeable, fixed traits.
Like it's written in stone.
Right. We walk around making these definitive declarations like, I am a highly motivated person, or I am just a lazy person, or I am a procrastinator.
We treat our personality like a blood type.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
But the text completely reframes this. Personalisms are not static traits. They are a living, breathing, highly reactive metabolic system.
Okay, so a system.
Yes, they represent the internal fuel system that takes a raw, abstract intent and actually combusts it into forward momentum. And this entire system is broken down into 3 specific triads.
I want to spend some serious time on that first triad because it completely rewired how I think about ambition.
It's powerful.
It's the sequence of desire to drive to direction, and it all initiates with desire.
Right.
But the text defines desire in a way that feels almost, I don't know, dangerous. It's not defined as a logical, well-thought-out, spreadsheet-backed plan. It is defined as a raw, unfiltered, primal want.
And it has to be raw, because logic often acts as a dampener to genuine desire.
Oh, totally.
Desire is that visceral pull you feel in your gut or your chest long before your rational, heavily socialized mind steps in to justify it. Or as is much more common, to suppress it.
We are so good at suppressing it.
We are. Most of us are terrified of our true desires because they feel inherently impractical, socially dangerous, or selfish.
Right, you have that sudden thought like, I want to move to the woods and be a furniture maker, or I want to leave this safe marriage.
Yes.
And instantly, within a millisecond, the rational mind slams down the gavel and says, how will you pay the mortgage? What about the kids? What about your 401k?
And so we bury the desire. We just pave over it.
We really do.
But the text argues that desire isn't a frivolous luxury. It is pure, unadulterated biometric data.
Biometric data. I like that.
It is your internal system telling you exactly what it is genuinely hungry for, what it needs to sustain actual vitality. If you suppress that desire, because it doesn't fit your current logical framework, you are literally cutting the fuel line before the engine even has a chance to turn over.
You're starving it.
You're demanding your car to drive while simultaneously siphoning all the gas out of the tank.
But assuming you don't cut the line, assuming you let yourself actually feel that raw want, that desire then converts into drive.
Exactly.
Drive is the combustion phase. It's when that raw, abstract want becomes channeled into actual physical momentum. It's the sustained effort, the late nights, the early mornings.
The hustle.
Right. But here is where the text introduces a massive pitfall. It points out that drive without direction is just exhausting, chaotic busyness.
It's the hamster wheel. If we connect this to the bigger picture of our modern culture, think about the classic celebrated overachiever.
Oh, the hustle culture heroes.
Exactly. Our society heavily rewards drive, regardless of where it's pointed. So you have people with immense, staggering amounts of drive. They're working 80-hour weeks. Their calendars are double booked. They are constantly answering emails at midnight.
Sounds like half the people I know.
Right, but they lack true direction, meaning they lack a specific target that is deeply aligned with their authentic values.
They're essentially revving a Ferrari in neutral.
Yes. Or they are driving the Ferrari at 150 miles an hour in the wrong direction.
Wow.
They're just spinning their tires in the mud.
Yeah.
It creates massive heat, massive noise, and the illusion of importance, but there is zero actual forward progress toward a life they genuinely want to be living. And eventually, the engine just blows.
And the flip side of that equation is equally tragic. You can have direction without drive.
Oh, yes.
That's the person who has everything perfectly mapped out. And full disclosure, I've been this person.
I think we all have.
You have the perfect vision board, the beautifully color-coded planners, the perfectly articulated 5-year goals. You know exactly, down to the millimeter, where you want to go.
Your spreadsheet is flawless.
Flawless. You have flawless direction.
Yeah.
But there is absolutely zero momentum.
Because there's no fuel in the tank. They have the map, but they suppressed the raw desire years ago. So there is no drive available to power the journey.
It's just a map sitting in the glove box.
Exactly. The spark of desire has to ignite the drive, and that explosive drive has to be meticulously aimed by direction. That sequential flow is non-negotiable for momentum.
So that's the first triad, desire, drive, direction. Then we move to the second triad, which acts as a sort of diagnostic test for the first one.
Yes.
And that's value, willingness, and worth.
This triad is brilliant because it forces you to pressure test your own hypocrisy.
Ooh, hypocrisy. Tell me more.
Well, we all have a list of stated values. You might claim that you highly value, say, deep, authentic connection in your relationships. Or you value innovation at work.
Right, things that sound great on a resume or a dating profile.
Exactly. But the text doesn't care about what you claim to value.
Yeah.
It asks, are you actually willing to test that value? Willingness is the metric of reality. It means you are genuinely prepared to experience the friction, the risk, and the discomfort required to uphold that value in the real world.
Okay, let's put that in a real-world context. If I say I value deep connection with my partner, but I am terrified of conflict, what happens?
If you are terrified of conflict, you will avoid the awkward, highly vulnerable conversations that are the prerequisite for deep connection.
Right.
Therefore, your willingness is zero. And if your willingness is zero, preference.
It's performative.
Yes, it's performative. It's a nice idea you like to think about yourself, but it's not an actual fuel source in your engine.
Ouch. That is a sharp mirror to look into.
Right.
If you aren't willing to endure the discomfort of the value, you don't actually hold the value. And then the third part of that triad is worth. And this is about decoupling your value from your output, right? Shifting your internal fuel from being conditional to being intrinsic.
Precisely. I am worthy of love or rest or respect only if I achieve this specific outcome.
Only if I get the promotion.
Right. Only if I get the promotion. Only if I lose the weight. Only if I make this much money. That is a terrible fuel source because it is constantly fluctuating based on external circumstances.
It's incredibly unstable.
Highly unstable.
Yeah.
Intrinsic worth means your value is a non-negotiable baseline. It is the solid ground you stand on while you pursue your targets, not a prize you were trying to win at the end of the race.
Which flows seamlessly into the third and final triad of the internal engine: purpose, scope, and service.
Yes.
Now, I have to admit, this one hit me right between the eyes, specifically because of the word scope.
It's a tricky one.
We all want to have a purpose. We all want to feel like our lives matter, and we all want to be of service to the world or our community. But if your scope is undefined, your service becomes completely scattered.
It becomes an absolute liability.
Yeah.
Think about someone whose stated purpose is, I want to heal people.
Okay.
That is a beautiful, noble purpose. But if their scope is, I must be constantly available to heal literally everyone who crosses my path or asks for my time, their service becomes a recipe for rapid, catastrophic burnout.
There are no boundaries.
They have no boundaries. They are trying to heat the entire Pacific Ocean with a single match.
And the match just burns their fingers.
Exactly. By radically tightening and defining your scope by saying, my purpose is to heal and my scope is to deeply, intensely mentor 3 specific people this year, your service suddenly becomes concentrated.
Becomes laser focused.
It becomes powerful. It becomes sustainable. You stop draining your fuel tank, trying to be everything to everyone, which ultimately results in you being nothing to anyone.
Okay, I am tracking with all of this. It makes logical sense. But I have to push back here on behalf of the listener who might be feeling a little overwhelmed right now.
Of course.
And honestly, on behalf of my own internal cynic, isn't the human body sometimes just lazy?
That is the big question, isn't it?
Right. What if I do this entire intense internal audit? I check my desire, my drive, my direction. I analyze my values and my scope. And after all of that deep introspection, my internal fuel system is just screaming at me to eat a bag of chips and nap on the couch all day.
Just surrender to the couch.
Yeah. Am I supposed to just surrender to the sofa and say, well, my deep, authentic desire is to do absolutely nothing with my life?
I am so glad you brought this up because it is the most common and honestly most valid point of resistance. We are deeply conditioned by hustle culture to view any desire for rest as a moral failing or a systemic glitch.
Totally. We feel guilty for even thinking about a nap.
But the text actually anticipates this exact skepticism. It uses a phenomenal metaphor to reorient our thinking, and that is the GPS. I want you to think about how a highly advanced GPS system works in your car. When you type in a destination, the GPS doesn't argue with you.
Yeah.
It doesn't judge the destination. It doesn't say, why do you want to go to Cleveland? Cleveland is boring.
Right. It just says calculating route.
Yes. It simply takes the destination as an absolute truth, evaluates the current terrain, the traffic, the road closures, and calculates the most optimal, sustainable route to get you from point A to point B.
Makes sense.
Your body, your entire somatic, biological, and internal fuel system works very much the same way. If you set a genuine destination, a target that is truly, deeply aligned with your authentic values, your body will absolutely help you get there.
Okay.
However, it will very likely suggest a wildly different route than your hyper-rational, productivity-obsessed mind planned out.
Oh, I see where this is going. The mind is a terrible navigator.
The mind is highly susceptible to external conditioning. Your mind might say, the only acceptable route to launching this business is working 80 hours a week, sleeping 4 hours a night, and drinking 6 cups of coffee a day.
The grind.
Right. Your body, your internal GPS, looks at that plan and says, I can absolutely get you to a successful business launch, but I am not taking that route. That route will destroy the vehicle before we cross state lines.
It's going to total the car.
Exactly. So the body says, my suggested route includes 8 hours of sleep, strategic periods of absolute rest, and time spent walking in the woods.
So the sudden, overwhelming urge to take a nap isn't the body rejecting the destination. It's the body insisting on a sustainable route so the vehicle doesn't explode.
In many cases, yes. The nap is a strategic pit stop. But, and here's the critical exception, the place where this framework gets incredibly deep and slightly uncomfortable. Sometimes your body is actively rejecting the destination.
Wait, what do you mean?
If your internal GPS is constantly, aggressively, relentlessly rerouting you to the couch, if you are experiencing chronic procrastination that borders on paralysis, no matter how many productivity hacks you try, It is very likely because the destination you typed into the system isn't actually yours.
Whoa.
It might be a deeply inherited goal. It might be your parents' unfulfilled destination that they subconsciously handed to you. It might be society's incredibly narrow definition of success.
Like getting a law degree because that's what smart people do.
Exactly. Or it might just be a target you genuinely picked for yourself 10 years ago, but you have evolved, and it no longer fits who you are today.
That is so common.
Your body, in its deep, primal, uncompromising wisdom, knows it is a fake target. And it is flat out refusing to combust precious, finite fuel on a destination that will leave you feeling hollow and empty when you finally arrive.
That is profound. What looks like self-sabotage is actually your internal fuel system staging a protest.
That's beautifully put.
So when you are paralyzed, you have to ask yourself a very hard question. Am I just needing a different, slower route to my true goal? Or am I trying to reach a destination that isn't even mine to begin with?
And that requires a level of honesty that most people avoid their entire lives.
Okay, so let's say you do that grueling work. You clean out your engine, you discover your true targets. Your desire, drive, and direction are perfectly, beautifully aligned.
The engine is purring.
Yes, your internal GPS is locked onto an authentic destination. You possess a pristine, high-performance internal engine. But what happens if you take that perfect billion-dollar engine and you drop the car straight into a toxic, 3-foot-deep mud swamp?
The engine floods, the wheels spin frantically in the mud, you burn a massive amount of fuel, but you are completely hopelessly stuck.
And that terrifying scenario brings us directly to the second major concept from the sources, the map, or what the text refers to as environmentistics.
This is where it gets really practical.
Because here's the brutal truth that self-help books rarely admit. You cannot willpower your way through a fundamentally broken external terrain.
You really can't.
You can have the best mindset in the world, but if the environment demands your failure, you will fail. The text breaks this external terrain down into 3 distinct, measurable elements: location, wraps, and winces.
Let's start by redefining location. When we hear location, we immediately think of geography. I live in New York, or I live in a rural farm town.
Right.
Geography matters, of course.
Yeah.
But environmentistics expands this concept dramatically. Location is your physical space, yes, but it is equally your social location, your economic location, and your temporal location.
Temporal location, as in where you are in time.
Exactly. Every single location, whether physical or temporal, has specific affordances, which are things it makes naturally easy, and severe constraints, which are things it makes incredibly hard.
Give me an example of a temporal constraint.
Let's look at temporal location. Say your current temporal location is, I am the parent of a 6-month-old baby, or I am the primary caregiver for a parent with dementia.
Okay.
The absolute constraint of that temporal location is sleep deprivation and unpredictable interruptions.
Oh, absolutely.
No amount of internal drive, no amount of vision boarding will magically conjure 8 hours of uninterrupted, deep focus work time.
It's just physically impossible.
Right. If you try to operate as if you were in the temporal location of a single 25-year-old with zero dependence, you will break. You have to design your expectations and your life architecture around the concrete reality of the terrain you're actually standing in.
You have to map the actual terrain, not the terrain you wish you had.
Exactly.
And then there are the wraps. This concept is fascinating. Wraps are the layers that surround you. The people, the institutions, the cultural norms, the familial expectations. They are the social fabric wrapping around your identity. And wraps can be incredibly protective, right? Like a great mentor, a therapist, or a wildly supportive friend group that pushes you to grow. But they can also be highly constrictive.
They can. And the danger of wraps is often not malicious enemies. The most dangerous wraps are often well-intentioned loved ones.
Oh, that is so true.
This is a very common scenario. Let's say you decide you want to leave a highly stable, prestigious corporate job to start a risky creative business.
A terrifying leap.
Your family loves you deeply. They want you to be safe. They want you to be secure. So out of love, they constantly bombard you with questions. Are you sure this is a good time? The economy is terrible right now. Is this really sustainable? What about your health care? What about your retirement fund?
They are essentially wrapping you in a thick blanket of their own unexamined anxiety.
Precisely. They aren't trying to ruin your life. They're trying to save it. But their wrap is suffocating your transformation.
It's pulling you down.
It acts as an echo chamber that amplifies your own internal fear and completely dampens your willingness to experiment. The text insists that you have to recognize that wrap for what it actually is, a constraint disguised as care.
So what do? Do you just cut off your family?
Not necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to actively, consciously renegotiate that boundary. You might have to say, I love you, but we can no longer discuss my career.
Hard boundary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, you have to aggressively counterbalance it by wrapping yourself in a new secondary community of risk takers and entrepreneurs who normalize the exact behavior your family pathologizes. You have to curate your wraps.
Which leads us to the most visceral bodily part of mapping your terrain, the winces.
The winces.
I love this concept because it brings everything out of the realm of theory and right into the physical body. The sources describe a wince as that immediate, involuntary bodily no that surfaces when something in your environment is fundamentally misaligned with who you actually are. It's an energetic pain point.
It is the body signaling a severe boundary violation or an identity mismatch.
Yes.
And the tragic part is, we are trained by society from a very young age to aggressively override our winces. We were told to smile through the discomfort. We call it being professional or being polite or just being adult. We numb the wince.
Yes. The text gives such a relatable example for this. Sunday evening dread.
Everyone knows that feeling.
Right. You are sitting on your couch at 7 p.m. on a Sunday, you're watching a movie, and suddenly your stomach just plummets into your shoes at the thought of the work week starting tomorrow.
The Sunday scaries.
That is a massive, system-wide wince. It's not just everyone hates Mondays. It's your body saying the environment you're about to enter is toxic to my survival.
Or consider a much more subtle wince, which I find even more insidious.
Out on me.
Imagine you're at a family gathering and an aunt praises you, saying, you're always so reliable, you always put everyone else first, we don't even have to ask you for help. And instead of feeling warm and fuzzy about this compliment, you notice a sharp tightness in your jaw or a sudden heaviness in your chest. The compliment lands like a physical insult.
Because you realize you are being praised for your own subjugation.
Exactly. Your body knows the dark truth beneath the compliment. The body knows that you are being celebrated for your chronic self-abandonment. You are being praised for making yourself small so others can be comfortable.
That is chilling.
If we connect this to the broader environmental map, the text introduces the concept of emotional microclimates to explain why these winces occur. We very often confuse weather with climate.
How so?
Weather is temporary and passing. A thunderstorm passes. A bad day at a job you otherwise love passes. But climate is your baseline reality.
Right. Like if you live in Seattle, the climate is rain. It's not a passing storm. It's the default state.
Exactly. And we move through emotional microclimates every day. If you are generally an upbeat, energetic person, but every single time you walk into a specific weekly status meeting or every single time you visited a certain friend's apartment, you suddenly feel exhausted, drained, heavy, and cynical.
You haven't suddenly developed a personality disorder.
No, you have simply walked into a storm-producing microclimate.
It's like walking out of a sunny day straight into a dark, freezing cave.
Precisely. You aren't a depressed person. You are a person standing in a depressing microclimate. Winces are the vital radar pings that help you map these invisible microclimates.
And once you map them.
Once you map them, once you realize, this meeting room is a toxic microclimate, you can strategize. You can minimize your time in them. You can bring an ally with you, or at the very least, you can mentally put on a raincoat before you walk in. You stop blaming your internal engine for stalling when the reality is you just drove into a swamp.
Okay, so let's look at the mathematical formula the text provides for this. Transformation equals foundation times fuel times terrain.
It's multiplication, not addition.
Right, meaning if any one of those variables is a zero, the entire equation equals zero. You cannot sustain an aligned life if your environment demands constant self-betrayal.
No, you can't.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Here's the ultimate psychological plot twist for you, the listener.
The big reveal.
Imagine you have actually done all of this incredibly hard work. Your internal fuel is burning clean and hot. You know exactly what you desire. Your external terrain has been ruthlessly curated. You've set boundaries with your family. You've optimized your location. You've mapped your microclimates.
Everything is perfect.
You walk right up to the door of your shiny new life. You confidently reach for the handle, and a massive bouncer standing inside your own head steps right in front of you, crosses his arms, and says, "Sorry, you can't come in."
That internal bouncer is what the text introduces in Chapter 4.
Yeah.
It calls it the identity handler.
The identity handler, the ultimate mechanism of why we sabotage ourselves right at the finish line when everything else is perfect.
It is infuriating.
It really is. The identity handler is a psychological defense mechanism, and its entire job, its only reason for existing, is to protect your continuity and your coherence. It absolutely despises change.
Even positive change.
Even positive change. Because to the identity handler, change threatens the established known identity.
The identity handler has a favorite phrase. It's its ultimate weapon, and it consists of 3 incredibly simple, devastating words. That's not me.
That's not me. We say it all the time without even thinking.
We do, and we mistake it for an absolute objective truth. Think about when you are faced with a major threshold. Maybe it's hitting send on a highly vulnerable email pitching a new project.
Terrifying.
Or maybe it's speaking up and disagreeing with the CEO in a high-stakes meeting, or stepping into a visible leadership role. The block keeping you from doing it isn't a lack of skill.
Right.
It isn't a lack of time. The block is the internal voice confidently declaring, I'm just not the kind of person who does that. I'm behind the scenes. That's not me. The identity handler slams the door shut to protect the old version of you.
But I want to push on the why here. Why does the brain do this? Why does it want to keep us stuck in a smaller version of ourselves if the new opportunity is clearly, demonstrably better for our lives?
Because we have to understand that the identity handler is not irrational. It is deeply historical.
Historical.
It is essentially an avatar constructed from your oldest pain and trauma. Let's say when you were in middle school, every time you spoke up, showed enthusiasm, or became visible, you were harshly criticized, mocked by peers, or shut down by a parent.
Oh, middle school is a battlefield.
It is. So the identity hammer formed in that moment and learned a very clear survival-based lesson. Visibility equals extreme danger. Staying invisible in the background equals safety.
So it's a bodyguard.
Yes, a very aggressive, very outdated bodyguard. So now, 20 years later, you are a competent adult and you are offered a massive promotion that requires high visibility.
And the bouncer wakes up.
The identity handler panics. It steps in and says, that's not me, because it is desperately trying to save you from being mocked in the cafeteria again.
Yeah.
It is operating on 20-year-old code. It is fiercely protecting you from a threat that no longer exists in your current terrain.
Which brings in one of my absolute favorite metaphors from the entire text. It completely changed how I view myself. The text treats human identity like a gaming console, specifically a role-playing game, an RPG.
It's a brilliant way to frame it.
Think about when you start a new RPG video game. You get a blank character sheet. You have a certain number of stat points to distribute. Strength, charisma, stamina, empathy, intelligence. You build your character.
Right.
But the fundamental problem is, in real life, most of us are walking around at 30, 40, or 50 years old, still playing with the default starter character.
The starter character that was rolled for us by our parents, our early teachers, and our childhood environments.
Exactly. We didn't choose those stats. We just accepted them. We were told by a third-grade teacher, you are the quiet, dependable one.
Or our parents said, you aren't very creative, but you are a hard worker.
Yes, and we treat those assigned stats as fixed, permanent laws of physics.
No.
We treat our identity like it is a buried treasure that we have to dig up, look at, and simply accept, oh, I guess I'm a low charisma, high anxiety build. Oh, well.
We resign ourselves to it.
But the text flips this entirely. It says, we actually have the power to hit pause on the game, open the settings menu, and completely redistribute our skill points.
There is a quote from the text that acts as a total paradigm shift.
Yeah.
You are not discovering who you are. You are actively designing who you are becoming.
I love that. Actively designing.
If your identity handler says, I am the support person, I am not a leader, you have to recognize that is not a permanent truth. It is merely the current distribution of your skill points.
Right.
You can consciously choose to take 50 points out of background support and people-pleasing and put them directly into vocal leadership and boundary setting.
You are actively updating the code.
You are looking at the bouncer and saying, thank you so much for keeping me safe when I was 12, but the rules of this club have changed. I am the owner now, and I am allowed in.
But even if you manage to unfuse your identity from that starter character, you still have to interface with the world. You have to step out of the menu and back into the game.
You do.
To truly redesign this character sheet, to rewrite the code so the bouncer works for you instead of against you out in the real world, we have to look at the deep mathematical core of this entire life operating system.
The core mechanic.
Yes, and this brings us to the most complex part of the sources, the core mechanic, which the text calls the position of one.
This is, without a doubt, the deepest, most structural concept in the materials. It describes the fundamental shift from being a responsive one variable, which the text abbreviates as R1V, to becoming an autonomous variable one, or AV1.
Let's start with the default setting for the vast majority of humanity, R1V. I like to call this the weather vane mode.
That's a perfect description. In the R1V mode, the external world is the constant. The world, the room you walk into, the people around you, the market, they hold the position of one.
They are the fixed reality.
They are the fixed, immovable reality.
Hmm.
And you are the variable. You are the V. This means you are constantly, exhaustingly adjusting your personality, your pace, your energy, and even your opinions to match the room you just walked into.
It is the ultimate definition of people-pleasing, but operating on a deep, structural, almost neurological level. Let's give a really painful, detailed example of this. Think about walking into a tense Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, perfect example. If you are operating an R1V at that dinner, you walk in and your brain immediately starts scanning. You are a radar dish.
Beep, 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 beep.
Right. You are reading your uncle's facial expressions. You are noting the tone of voice your mother is using. You are managing reactions before they even happen.
You're walking on eggshells.
You contort your own opinions. Maybe laughing at a joke you don't find funny, or hiding a recent success so someone else doesn't feel insecure, just to keep the peace. Your internal state is entirely 100% dependent on the external environment.
Wow.
If the room is happy, you're allowed to be happy. If the room is tense, you are instantly anxious.
It sounds utterly exhausting. You have absolutely no internal battery. You are completely plugged into a chaotic external grid. You are a thermometer just reflecting the temperature of the room.
Exactly.
And it makes me wonder, what happens if both people in a romantic relationship are operating as R1V?
It creates a nightmare scenario. You end up with a highly reactive, closed loop of anxiety feeding anxiety.
Yeah.
Both people are desperately waiting for the other person to set the tone.
Are you mad? No, are you mad?
Yes. Both people are constantly adjusting to the perceived mood of the other, which is usually just a projection anyway. It is a hall of mirrors. There is no stable center, no anchor, no solid ground. It's a recipe for profound codependency, resentment, and eventual nervous system burnout.
So what does this all mean? That's the trap of the variable. How do we flip the math? What is the alternative to being a weather vane?
We have to shift to AV1, autonomous variable 1. You completely invert the equation. In this mode, you become the constant.
You hold the position of one.
You hold the position of 1. You bring a stable, deeply rooted internal principle into the room, and the environment becomes the variable that either adjusts to you, or at the very least, the environment becomes a terrain that you navigate without losing your own center.
You become the gravity source rather than the asteroid constantly getting caught in someone else's orbit.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this math scales up to your entire life architecture. Think about a career path.
Okay.
In an R1V career, you are constantly waiting to be chosen. You wait for opportunities to miraculously appear on job boards. You adjust your resume and your personality to match whatever the hiring manager seems to want.
You're just trying to fit the mold.
You define your success entirely by your boss's approval. You are a leaf blowing in the corporate wind.
And an AV1 career.
In an AV1 career, you create opportunities based on your internal alignment.
Uh,
You already know your true target, you know your optimal fuel, and you engage with the market as an autonomous entity.
That's powerful.
You say, here is the value I bring. Who needs this? Success is defined internally. Am I aligned with my core values? And am I making a meaningful contribution? You are no longer waiting for permission to exist.
I love the empowerment of that, but I have to play devil's advocate here.
Please do.
If I am the constant, if I hold the one position and expect the room to adjust to me, doesn't that run a very real risk of just becoming incredibly arrogant? Like, I am the center of the universe, I'm the main character, and everyone else is an NPC who must bend to my will.
That is a crucial, vital distinction to make, and it's where many people misunderstand the concept of autonomy. Being AV1 does not mean being a tyrant, a narcissist, or a bulldozer.
Okay, good.
It doesn't mean ignoring feedback or steamrolling other people's needs. It means your core identity and your foundational principles are anchored. Because your core is secure, you can actually be incredibly empathetic, wildly flexible, and deeply collaborative.
But you're doing so from a place of conscious choice, not a place of fearful reaction.
Exactly. You bend because you choose to collaborate with the room, not because you are terrified of the room rejecting you.
Ah, so it's the difference between a tree swaying in the wind because it has deep roots versus a tumbleweed just getting blown away.
A beautiful analogy.
But to keep from becoming rigid or tunnel-visioned, the text introduces this amazing, highly dynamic concept, the inversion kick.
Yes, the inversion kick.
It honestly sounds like a finishing move from a martial arts movie. Watch out, I'm going to hit you with the inversion kick.
It is absolutely a cognitive martial arts move. The text explicitly warns that you don't just achieve perfect AV1 Zen one day and then float on a cloud of autonomy forever. If you stay completely anchored in your own perspective all the time, what the text calls the iterator mode, where you are constantly driving the content and imposing your will, you become disconnected. You lose touch with the context. You lose the vital wisdom and the feedback of the environment.
You get so lost in the weeds of your own doing that you forget to look at the forest.
Precisely. You become a bulldozer. So to prevent that, you have to execute the inversion kick. You have to intentionally, deliberately kick back into what the text calls delineator mode, where you let the environment inform you.
You zoom out.
You zoom out. You look at the broader context. You actively gather feedback. You listen without formulating your next point. You allow the environment to shape your strategy for a moment.
And this is the key to the move. You do this consciously, right?
Yes, you do it consciously, and then you kick back into iterator mode to take autonomous action. It is a constant rhythmic oscillation. It's like breathing.
Breathe in, breathe out.
You breathe out, acting on the world. You breathe in, listening to the world. If you don't use the inversion kick, you will either become a rigid, isolated tyrant, or you will get sucked right back into the matrix of being a highly reactive R1V puppet.
Okay, knowing this complex math is incredible. The theory is airtight. But it leaves us with the ultimate practical question. How do we actually do this on a random Tuesday morning?
That's the real test.
How do we practically rewrite this equation when we are stressed out, our kids are screaming, we are late for work, and we are staring at an incredibly intimidating email? That brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Putting it together, person, persona, principle, and the XO equation.
To consistently hold that autonomous variable one position in the chaos of daily life, you have to master a very specific internal triad: person, persona, and principle.
Okay, let's unpack this triad, because I think this is where the rubber finally meets the road. What are the three parts?
First, you have the person. This is your core, untouched, witnessing self. It is the deep awareness beneath all the various roles you play in your life. It's the part of you that can step back and simply observe your own thoughts.
Okay, the observer.
Second, you have the persona. This is the specific temporary role you are playing in any given room or situation. You have a persona for being an employee, a different persona for being a parent, a different persona for being a friend.
It's like putting on different hats or equipping different armor sets in our RPG metaphor.
Exactly. You need personas to function in society. The profound danger arises when the person fuses completely with the persona.
When you forget it's a hat.
If you fuse with your mid-level support staff persona, you begin to believe, at your core, I am just support staff. I am not a leader. I have no power. This is all I am. You lose access to the witnessing self. You become trapped in the costume.
That's so common.
To prevent this fusion, you need the third element, which is the principle.
The anchor.
Yes. The principle is the deeper why that stabilizes both the person and the persona. It is the overarching core value you are bringing to the temporal role.
So practically speaking, instead of saying, I am just support staff, which is a fused identity, you shift the language. You say, I am currently hosting the support staff mode because my deeper permanent principle is stewardship and helping the entire team succeed.
Yes, I host multiple modes. That subtle shift in language changes everything. It completely unfuses your core identity from the temporary role.
It creates distance.
I am in leadership mode right now. I am in learning mode right now. I am in parenting mode right now. You remain the autonomous one who is consciously holding the role rather than allowing the role to hold you hostage.
Which perfectly sets up the final, most actionable tool in the entire text, the XO equation. The text lays this out as a literal mathematical formula for actual lived transformation. X plus 0 equals XO.
It looks like high school algebra, but it is actually a profound map of neurobiological and behavioral change. X represents the operators. These are the mechanical, physical actions you take in the real world.
And the 0.
The number 0 represents the narrative. This is your identity, the internal story you tell yourself about who you are and what you deserve.
Let's use the text's brilliant example of the Tuesday morning standoff.
I love this example.
You are sitting at your desk. You need to send a scary boundary-setting email to a client who is taking advantage of you, or maybe an email to your boss asking for a well-deserved promotion. It's terrifying.
Your hands are sweating.
Exactly. If you just focus on the X meaning, you grit your teeth, you feel utterly terrified, your jaw is clenched, your heart is pounding, and you just smash the send button, you have technically taken action.
Yes, the X was executed.
Ugh.
But your internal narrative, the zero, hasn't changed at all. You still feel small, terrified, and like an imposter. It's a purely mechanical change.
Well.
And because the narrative didn't change, the next time you have to send a scary email, it will be just as terrifying.
Conversely, let's look at the spiritual bypass route. If you only focus on the zero, you sit on a meditation cushion, you visualize success, you stand in front of the bathroom mirror doing power poses and saying affirmations like, I am a powerful, assertive leader.
I've all seen those videos.
Right, but you never actually sit down at your computer and hit send on the email. That is just a fantasy.
It is hallucination.
Mm-hmm.
The narrative changed beautifully in your head, but the concrete reality of your life, your income, and your boundaries remained exactly the same. You were still being taken advantage of.
But when you combine them, X plus zero, you sit down. You acknowledge the fear. You send the scary email. That's the action, the X.
Yes.
But you do it while actively, consciously updating your internal story, the narrative. You say to yourself in that exact moment, I am sending this email because I am actively becoming the kind of person who aggressively advocates for their own value.
That's the magic.
You take the terrifying action from a place of an updated identity. That is XO. That is lived, integrated transformation. You change the physical room by sending the email, and you fundamentally change yourself by updating who you are allowed to be.
And we have to stress that this is not a one-time magic trick. You don't just do an XO move once, level up, and become a serene Zen master for the rest of your life.
I wish.
The text is very clear that this is an ongoing, relentless daily practice of integration. In fact, it recommends a specific 15-minute daily integration practice.
What does that look like?
Before you look at your phone, before you check your email and become reactive to the world, you sit down and you check your engine. You check your fuel. What is my true, raw desire today? Am I driving toward my authentic target or someone else's?
Checking the GPS.
Then you check your map, your terrain. What specific winces do I need to honor today? Are there microclimates I need to avoid? What wraps are constricting me right now?
Checking the weather.
And finally, you check your mathematical position. Am I stepping into this Tuesday as a reactive, people-pleasing variable, or am I anchoring myself as an autonomous constant? It is the daily, non-negotiable rhythm of checking the engine, reading the map, and taking the wheel.
Which brings us, incredibly, to the close of this journey. We have covered massive sweeping ground today. We started deep in the dark of the engine room, mapping our internal fuel, the complex personalisms of desire, drive, and direction.
We did.
We surveyed the unforgiving external terrain, the environmentistics of location, wraps, and winces. We learned how to outsmart the bouncer in our own minds, the outdated identity handler.
Such a huge step.
And we finally learned the deep math of freedom, flipping the script from being a reactive weather vane in R1V to an internally anchored gravity source in AV1. And we learned how to use the XO equation to actually live that shift in real time.
All of that is incredibly powerful, but there is one final layer. Because it is very easy to look at all of this, the fuel, the terrain, the autonomy, the character sheets, and think that this is purely an individualistic pursuit.
Like, it's just about me.
Right. It can sound like a selfish, isolated project of hyper-self-optimization. But this raises an important question, and the text closes with a truly profound look at what it calls the meta-architecture. It zooms all the way out and brings in the analogy of an ant colony or a massive interconnected forest ecosystem.
Right. The idea that a single ant running along a branch doesn't know the grand overarching strategy of the entire colony. But by acting with total integrity, efficiency, and alignment in its specific local environment, it sustains the life of the whole.
Exactly. The text argues that when you do this exhausting work, when you shift your personal position of one from being fearfully reactive to beautifully autonomous, you are not just optimizing your own private little life.
You're doing something bigger.
You are a vital node in a massive unseen network. Ecological systems, whether forests or human societies, do not survive when one single element dominates everything. And they certainly don't survive when every element is purely reactive to fear and anxiety.
They collapse.
They survive on deep interdependence. They survive and thrive only when each individual element is deeply anchored in its authentic role and operating from its true fuel source.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, yes, you listening to this right now, with a provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
Something to really think about.
What if your personal evolution is not just about you? What if your stubborn refusal to be a reactive variable, your absolute refusal to constantly bend to the anxiety of the room, is the exact specific cultural signal needed to break a toxic generational cycle in your family?
A powerful thought.
What if your uncompromising commitment to finding your true target and aligning your internal fuel with it actually stabilizes the larger ecosystem of your workplace or your marriage or your community? What if tending to your own wholeness, becoming the conscious architect of your own meaning, isn't selfish at all?
It might be the most selfless thing you can do.
Exactly. What if it is actually the most profound act of collective transformation you could possibly make?
It is the ultimate realization that the towering health of the forest depends entirely and intimately on the deep, healthy roots of the individual trees.
A solid foundation, a burning engine, an accurate map, and the deep roots to hold it all together in the storm. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. I strongly encourage you to step out today, check your fuel, read your terrain, and consciously, bravely design your next threshold. Stop trying to squeeze that semi-truck through the bicycle tunnel, turn the wheel, build a new road. We'll see you next time.